Hello all. Thank you for joining today's webinar on Creo Illustrate. We're excited to show you how Creo Illustrate simplifies the creation of interactive 3D technical illustrations, animations, and sequences to improve service documentation, part identification, and more. Before we dive in, just a quick reminder to submit your questions anytime in the Q&A panel, and we'll do our best to address them. Now, I'm pleased to introduce today's presenter, our very own applications engineer, Jade Goldman. Let's get started.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jade Goldman. I'm an applications engineer with EAC. Today, I'm going to be presenting on an overview of Creo Illustrate. Just going to go over the agenda, touch on some of the traditional challenges encountered by technical illustrators and the solutions to those. Hint, it is probably Creo Illustrate, as well as some capabilities and benefits that it provides. I will also do a short demonstration so that you can actually see Creo Illustrate in action. So one of the traditional challenges with the illustration process is that it is largely a manual process that can be slow, and it's rarely up to date with the current design or engineering materials that are available in the organization. Many illustrations are not built off of rich and accurate 3D CAD data. So the design data is or should be the most accurate digital representation of an end product and should be the easiest and most obvious choice when looking for what to use in your illustration process. And once the illustrations are manually created, the updating process would also be completely manual, or worse, require a redraw from scratch. So that can mean that your end illustration is either not up to date or just not done at all. Another big challenge is that the illustrators themselves simply aren't always familiar with the CAD authoring system. And that can mean that they're either relying on engineers or designers to help them create their tech pub content, or they're just doing things without having any idea what it is that they are touching. This can lead to your engineering department assisting the illustration team with creating views from CAD models, which is, of course, a huge waste of time. And on that topic of time, the illustration process is often done after all of that design and 3D work has already been completed. So this would be a serial process that's time dependent, often on the delivery of an end item to the field. So that right out of the gate leaves illustrators with a time deficit to create their content. So the solution to that is PTC's Creo Illustrate. As I mentioned before, it is a 3D environment for working with 3D source models and includes a host of tools specific to technical illustrators. Technical illustrations are such an integral part of creating not only service and technical information, but marketing and sales tools, and really within almost any other department that you can think of. One of the core capabilities of Illustrate is that the images are built directly off of that rich source 3D CAD data, which means that we can link back to that source object, and as updates, we can ensure that everything's updated accordingly. Also, the source material brought into the program is CAD heterogeneous, meaning it is not specific to only PTC formats. So there is a variety of formats that would encompass other CAD systems as well as third-party neutral CAD formats. You do also have the ability to add, work with, and edit a bill of materials specific to an illustration project file. And there are callouts in the program that can be dynamically tied to those 3D objects, which can then be used to build part and catalog pages, as well as dynamic parts lists. There's also an extendable library inside of Creo, which includes 3D shapes and objects that you can add to your image. So there's an extensive graphical technique tool as well. You can define pen styles, line weights, coloring, rendering, and then things like 2D projection or 3D output styles with hidden lines or cross sections, or really however it is that you might want to show your images. There is also a fun ability to create animations and sequences that include animating parts and working tools or showing different processes. Creo Illustrate also fully integrates with PTC's Windchill PLM system, and it can be used to create parts or catalog pages, as well as representations that are connected back to that engineering CAD through Windchill. And then there's the ability to publish multiple formats for deliverables from one core illustration file. So those could encompass 3D or 2D vector graphics, or maybe a 2D raster image, whatever you want, all coming from that same source. All right, now for the demonstration. So as I said, Creo Illustrate is PTC's 3D technical illustration solution. So it's an application that serves as a one-stop shop solution for creating all things technical graphics. So that's inclusive of illustrations to support operations manuals, service-based illustrations, manufacturing-based illustrations, illustrated parts lists, as well as work instructions that can be animated in Creo Illustrate. So we can import a variety of different types of file formats, whether you're importing those file formats directly from your desktop or a shared folder location. We also have the ability to import directly from Windchill through a direct integration. So I can easily pull data down from the PDM system into Creo Illustrate as my starting point. Within Windchill, you can see that I'm logged into the system as a particular user, and I'm accessing a bill of material for a parking brake. On the left-hand side, you can see the bill of material, and then on the right-hand side, the visualization. So on the visualization tab, you can see that we've published a representation of this data. This is a lightweight form and a PVC file extension, and we can import this directly into Creo Illustrate. The process begins with adding the file to my workspace. Simply add the file to the workspace, and from Creo Illustrate, I can then easily browse the file, find that file, and import it into Illustrate. So upon selecting open, I'm going to be prompted with how do I want to update the illustration if any changes might occur. Best practice is to leave it as confirmation. When I import the data, you can see that I've brought in the engineering bill of material, and then I will be able to pick and choose in a modular fashion which parts and which assemblies I want to work with in Creo Illustrate simply by dragging and dropping. If you have combination states that have been created in Creo parametric, such as view states, orientations, explode states, simplified reps, those all come into Creo Illustrate and serve as a starting point. So here you can see I brought in the 3D geometry. I've imported it from Windchill and brought it down into Creo Illustrate. And now I can just start interacting on the geometry. So since Creo Illustrate is a 3D technical illustration solution, we do need to start with the geometry. And as I click on the parts in this bill of material, they highlight in the visualization. And as I click on them in the visualization, they highlight in the bill of material. We can easily highlight parts, isolate parts, unhide parts, and filter down to just the geometry that's applicable to the illustration. As I click on a part, I can drag using the Copilot to position the part in any XYZ position, or even rotate the part. So as I select on them, I can very easily add explode lines. These explode lines are dynamic, so I can control the pathing of the explode line, the direction of the explode line, and even the full length of it. We also have rendering states. So these are predefined render states showing shaded with edges, white shaded states, HLR, and many others. here I've moved on to annotations. They're very easy to create within Creo Illustrate. So there's preset callouts that you can leverage off of for your ability to create those. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and close out this one, and I'm going to navigate over to another file that's been already built out a little bit with a little more information. So I'm going to open that file from Windchill, and upon opening that file, it's going to ask me, do I want to check out the data and modify it? So since we are connected to Windchill, we're going to check it out, take edit control of the file, and start working on the illustration. Takes a moment to load. Okay, so under my Figures tab, you can see that I have a variety of different types of figures set up in Creo Illustrate. So this is a unique application in which we can create many different types of illustrations in one single file, and then pick and choose how we want to publish those out at the end of the process. I also have the ability to look at a thumbnail view of those illustrations to give me a quick representation of what they might look like. Starting with the phantom parts illustration, changing the appearance of parts within Creo is very easy. Again, you simply just interact on the geometry. So as I highlighted that part, I have a dynamic tab that opens up at the top of the screen called Parts, and it highlights me to go in and change the colors of those parts. So changing the colors of the parts does not affect the engineering bill of material. It's only specific to my illustration. So we can quickly toggle in between different types of rendering modes. And here we applied a white shaded rendering mode to give us more of an illustration shading technique. And we're going to go ahead and select on some particular components in the bill of material and phantom some parts out. Once those parts are phantom, I can interact on underlying internal components. So this is important because it's now a background reference part and it is transparent for me to see through. So we'll go ahead and change the color of some of these assemblies and components within the internal area of the parking brake. And again, simply selecting on the geometry, clicking on the color functionality and changing the color. We leverage off of an RGB scale for color changes. So you can also set up custom colors to quickly change the colors of components based off of a standard. Looking into sectioning, we'll create a cross section. Cross sections in Illustrate are also pretty simple. We simply jump to the section tab, view the cross section, change the direction of it. We can drag and pull on the cross section to change the locations. And as I cut through the models, it's very dynamic. It's very fast to cut through that geometry. And we can display planar cuts, quarter cuts, and we can also choose which parts actually intersect with the cross section. In this case here, we are going to select on every part, maybe remove, we'll say, the shaft from the selected set for the cross section. So here we'll remove, and you can see that the shaft is excluded, and notice my phantom part is also excluded. And the quarter cut cuts through everything else. So once we are done with our illustration, we simply update our thumbnail so that it correctly publishes at the end of the process. We will go ahead and jump to another figure, now working on a different figure that I'm modifying independent of the previous. So in this case, we're going to again change the colors of some of these parts, draw attention to the small little gasket here on this plug. Since it's a really small component, I want to draw an inset. So an inset, think of it as like a detailed view from a drawing. So we simply click on the part, we drag right off of it, and it creates a zoomed in focal view of that component. This inset is also dynamic. So as I drag and position it, it will change and update in that inset view itself. I can also change the shape of the inset view. I can modify many other properties about that inset view, the size of the focal point, weight of the lines, leaders, halo effects, and so forth. So here we will go ahead and apply a sweeping leader and give it a certain thickness value. And once I create those insets, I can also annotate within the inset itself. So here I'm using a special callout, which is pulling metadata directly from the part and inserting that metadata into the balloon. So we'll go ahead and change some of the properties about the annotation. Going to add some arrows. We'll change the label size. We're going to change the label shape, and maybe we'll align those labels up with one another. Lastly, I'm going to go ahead and place a note. You can also place in freeform notes. So as I type, you can see the note updating on the screen. Again, we can change everything about the note, the font size, the shape, if there's any leaders, halo effects, so on and so forth, even down to the colors. Perfect. All right, so one of my other favorite things is the standard symbols library. So these symbols are all 3D, and you can go ahead and create your own symbol too if you want to add those to a library and deploy those out to all of your end users. In this case, we're going to go ahead and put in this little warning symbol, and this is just to draw more attention and detail to the note for the end user or the end consumer. So I'm going to pop over to our next figure. Within this one, we're going to start creating some explode states. So these are very common types of illustrations that would support an illustrated parts list type of output. So as I select on the geometry, I can simply use the Copilot and start exploding the parts outward. And you can notice that I can drag out single parts, or I can choose multiple parts at one time. So once I've created my explode state, set everything exactly where I want it, I can start then creating my explode lines. Selecting on that explode line tool creates a dynamic explode line back to the default location of that part. So as I click and move that part around, notice that explode line will move with that part, and I can control how it reacts with other components in that state. So here, let's go ahead and drag this explode line outward a little bit. So make sure to go through that part. And we'll complete the illustration here with some callouts. Perfect. All right, so I've got that set up the way I like it. So in this next figure on the left, we're going to talk a little bit more about some of the more advanced things that you can do with explode lines. So since those explode lines are dynamic, it allows us to interact with them in different ways and control how they pass through other parts. So we will create another quick explode state. Notice if I want to drag and move parts around, I simply interact directly in that visualization pane. Or again, I can select those parts within the bill of materials on the left-hand side of the screen. So we'll go ahead and grab the last set of components here, maybe all the discs in the parking brake, and we will explode those outward. Once I've created that final explode state, I'm going to go ahead and create an explode line again. I would simply select on that part, select the explode line tool, and it's going to create a path back to the default part location. In this case here, I can modify the starting and ending positions of the explode line. So I'm going to go ahead and change the new ending point and starting point of the explode line just by selecting on other components. And then I can easily add in a second explode line and path that through my other parts to create a more advanced sweeping explode line. All right, one more. I'm going to go ahead and jump to our last figure and talk about work instructions. These are huge. Within Creo Illustrate, we can create animated work instructions. So these work instructions can be displayed in a number of different ways. They can be published and delivered through PVZ files. They can be published and displayed through HTML with WebGL, and they can also be used for any augmented reality experiences. So in this case here, I have two simple steps to show the disassembly process of this parking brake. If I want to continue the animation, I can simply select on parts, like the drop down for effects, and apply different effects to those parts. Here you can see that I have applied a fade out effect, and those parts will disappear from the view. So in my timeline, I'm capturing keyframes as well. These keyframes are important, and they are all very easily able to be modified and edited just by simply interacting on the tracks themselves in the timeline. So as I drag and pull and move those parts around in that visualization pane, you can see we're recording a keyframe track for every single movement and every effect we make. So if we change the color of that part with an effect, we'll select both of these and drag those outward. And you can notice the creation of those tracks in the timeline down below. So go ahead, hit the play button. You'll see our parts fade out and the other parts change to blue. Perfect. So once I create that animation, the best practice is to create the camera effects afterwards. So in this case here, as I drag my cursor back to the very beginning of the timeline, I am now able to minimize that bottom pane and start capturing the camera in locations that I want throughout the full animation. As I play the animation, I might want to hold the camera steady for a certain duration of time. And as the other parts on the other side of the parking brake start to translate and move and change colors, I might want to rotate the whole model around. So we'll go ahead, position it, and capture the camera again. Gotta unlock. All right, so notice in my timeline, I've created a camera track too. So I can modify that camera track to my liking as I simply drag, interact with it. On the keyframes, it'll allow me to very easily manipulate the animation. All right, we also have the ability to update animations fairly easily. So if I wanted to make any kind of change to the animation, I'd simply go to a previous step. I would make that change. And in this case here, we're going to say I want to hide out some parts. So we'll select on these base components and maybe some of our hardware. And we want to actually remove those from our animation. Now they have been included in all of my previous steps that I showed you. So if I go ahead and hide those, you should notice in all of my steps after the fact that they are going to be hidden. We cannot see them. So I've easily updated the animation. All right, perfect. That's exactly what I want. All right, so that is my final animation. So you can see that in this very quick short demo, we saw a high-level overview of Creo Illustrate and just a little bit of what it can do. Again, it is PTC's 3D technical illustration solution. So once we've created all of our illustrations, we have the ability to pick and choose how we want to publish the data. In this case, we do have the various formats that we can publish, like I said before. We can publish those 3D formats, 2D formats. So we can do JPEGs, TIFFs, bitmaps, vectorized formats, movies. In this case, I do have the variety of different types of figures. I've defined my publish formats that I want, and I can now select which formats I actually want to publish out. So we can publish separate files and get an individual file for each figure, and we can also publish one file, say a PVZ that contains all of those different formats wrapped into that single file. Since I'm done with my illustration, I'm going to go ahead and check it back into Windchill. So that would make that a version iteration controlled file within Windchill. And if any changes happen to that file with regards to the CAD model itself, because the data is all linked through Windchill, I can easily pass those changes down into my technical graphics. And then just navigating back into Windchill, you can see that this is my final Creo Illustrate file. I have the ability to open that data up in Creo View and look at my final deliverable. So this is what somebody would consume at the end of the day. The PVZ file would be the consumed file extension. So I pulled up Creo View to view the data. I am going to be using Creo View Lite to open the file. That said, you can use any flavor of Creo View. So you can use Creo View Express, which is that free version, Creo View Lite, which comes with the Windchill or Creo View MCAD. So you can see within that single PVZ file, you can see I have various PNGs, and I have a PDF that shows my illustrated parts list. I've applied a template to it to populate an itemized table along with my illustration, and I even have those cool animations. So I can come in here and play those step by step, play them as a single animated movie. So really, again, just to summarize Creo Illustrate, it's a solution that's going to allow us to leverage off of our CAD and use that as a starting point to create our technical graphics. Okay, so with that demonstration, hopefully you saw just a tiny bit of the real life value linked to using Creo Illustrate. Again, first and foremost, all of our illustrations are linked back to that one true 3D source. While still being linked, our illustrators are working confidently and independently, therefore freeing up engineering resources and hopefully minimizing potential duplicate work. All of that tied together should really maximize the use of illustrations for presenting any information to the end user. That then translates to that real value, which can be seen in increased accuracy, as well as accelerated maintenance and repair times, which then should lead to improved customer, both internal and external satisfaction. Thank you.